while there might be scenarios where other people are to blame, 90% of the time, if things aren't going well in your life, it's probably on you to have a look at what you've done. So my name's Tom McDonald. I've been an AFL football player for 13 seasons with the Melbourne Demons. Still currently playing, hopefully for a little bit longer. But happy to come and have a chat today.
And how did you grow up?
I grew up in a little town called Edenhope, which is in Western Victoria. It's about halfway between Adelaide and Melbourne, 4.5 hour drive each way. I was there until year 11, and then I went to school in Ballarat for year 12 as a boarder. For football, essentially. I was travelling a lot for junior footy at that stage, from back in the country to Melbourne every weekend, and so I went to school in Ballarat for a year, and then I came to Melbourne. But yeah, grew up as a farm kid essentially, 20 kilometres out of a little town called Edenhope, and probably pretty typical for most country kids at that stage. We take the school bus in every day, and small country town. Prep to year 12 was, I think, 200 kids total from all the way through. Sometimes year 12 would only have 3 or 4 students in the class. So, but that was pretty typical from where I grew up. So I was lucky to get the chance to move to Ballarat for football. That gave me the chance to actually play AFL. If that didn't happen, it's probably too difficult to make it to professional football from that level of country, unless you're just a genetic freak or a superstar from a young age, which I really wasn't. So that was sort of the journey to get to AFL.
So how does that work? That you wouldn't have been able to make it?
Well, so for example, in year 11, my mum would pick me up from school at midday. I'd have to train in Ballarat on a Thursday night, so it was a 3.5 hour drive. So I'd leave from school at midday, get to Ballarat around 4 o'clock, train from 4 till 7, and then get back in the team bus back to Horsham, where my mum would pick me up at 11 o'clock at night, and I'd get home at midnight. I'd go to school on the Friday, and then usually either mum or dad, we would get in the car and drive to Melbourne 5 hours on the Friday night, play footy on the Saturday morning for the TAC Cup team, and then drive home from Melbourne on the Saturday night and get home at 1 in the morning. And then you'd have local basketball or football training during the week. I think I did 50,000 kilometres in the car in my year 11 year. And so it was just unsustainable to try and play high level footy and do any sort of school study. And like, I wanted to do well at school. It wasn't the be all and end all, but I wanted to do well. And so it's just too hard to do that amount of travel and that amount of time in the car and try and play high level footy and do well at school.
So how did you deal with that?
Year 11, I just sort of tried to make do. I tried to focus. I was doing like the one year 12 subject as a year 11, so I focused on that one because I knew that's the one that counted. And I just sort of, I don't know, you do study in the car. You just, by the end of the year, you're just exhausted though. So that's when they said this football team, which is North Ballarat Rebels, or now it's Greater Western Victoria Rebels, they said there's an opportunity to get a partial scholarship to play footy in Ballarat, and then you don't have to travel for the trainings. There's a team bus that'll go up on the Saturday to play. It'll make it a lot easier for you. You have more exposure to AFL scouts, AFL talent guys, and it will give you a much better chance to still do well at school as well. We have tutors every night. And yeah, it was the best decision we ever made.
Amazing. How did your parents go with it?
I think it made their life a lot easier. I was the first, so there's 4 siblings. I'm the oldest, and so I went for year 12, and then after it went really well for me, I still did reasonably well at school, and I got drafted to play footy straight out of high school. My sister went the next year to Ballarat and Clarendon College in year 10, and then my brother did the same thing. He went to St Pat's where I went in year 10, and then my little sister went in year 10 as well. And so I think for them it was the realisation of how much easier it would be to do well at school with all the extra resources you got at those schools versus a tiny little country town. Plus, all our family were pretty sporty. My brother played AFL for 8 years as well. You just had so much more access to everything the city kids got, essentially. Mm-hmm. And just gave them all a better chance. They were all geniuses. All 3 other siblings all got 99 plus on their enter scores. And one's a surgeon, one played footy for 8 years, and one's still studying now. She's the youngest. So for our family, it was the best thing you could ever do to go to those schools.
And are your parents still on the farm?
Yep, still back at Edenhope.
So at that point in year 11, were you set on playing AFL, or?
I actually liked basketball more. So I'd done a couple of basketball tours over to the States with a team in year 10 and year 11. And I actually got offered to go play high school basketball in America, in Phoenix. And a month before I was due to go, the host family I was going to live with in year 11 over there, that's junior year for Americans, the host family parents split up and they said, sorry, we don't have a place for you to stay anymore. Can you come back next year? We'll get organised. And that would have been my year 12 year when I was sort of tossing up between footy and basketball. And I was probably more realistically a chance to go further in footy. I was never going to be an NBA player. And I sort of thought, well, I'm going to have a real go at footy in my year 12 year. If I don't get drafted, I'm going to go back to training for basketball and try and go to college in America after that. But I did get drafted in the end and stayed with footy. So I wasn't dead set. Like a lot of kids go from 5 years old, I want to play AFL, I want to be a footballer. I love playing, but I love basketball just as much. And so I was sort of I would chop and change from year to year, which one was more important.
And you had the idea you wanted to do well at school as well.
I wanted to do well. I wasn't, like my brothers and sisters were all obsessed with study, and like we had a tutor at St. Pat's from 6:30 to 8:30 every night. And so I'd use that time, whereas a lot of boys would stuff around and play computer games or do whatever they could do. And I would use it, but I wasn't obsessive like some kids were.
But like you've got a degree from
I'm finished now.
The best uni in the country.
Yeah. Well, debatable, but I finished it, yeah. I finished uni. It took me 8 years after getting drafted to finish it, but got there eventually.
Yeah, and you did commerce, right?
Did commerce, yeah.
Yeah, so like you're selling yourself pretty short. Like that's like you got into a good uni.
Got into a good uni, yeah. Yeah, like I did well enough at school to get into that uni and do it, but it's never been the most important thing in my life. Like I was sort of doing uni part-time. You're in and out. I wasn't always in heaps of classes because of footy schedules. So I've never been that obsessed with getting the best marks. I'm more about, well, how would I actually use this in real life? And I'm sort of going through that stage at the moment, getting ready for finishing footy in the next few years. And I'm not really worried about where my degree gets me. I'm more worried about who wants me to actually work, like who could use what I bring to the table is more important for me. Yeah. Rather than what I learn at uni now. 9-10 years ago that I can't remember any of it.
Yeah. But I imagine lots of people aren't thinking like that at all.
In the football world, that's pretty common because boys are just focused on footy. They'll do their uni and try to do well enough at it to obviously not fail and get reasonable marks. But it's a bit different in footy because it's like a secondary thing, whereas a lot of kids in uni, when you're 21, the most important thing is doing well in your class. Whereas we're trying to do well in the footy field, like we're getting paid to play footy. So it's probably more common in where I come from, whereas I can see the other side of it where it's uni students are more worried about obviously doing well with their tests.
Mm. So was that all just you being self-motivated, or were your parents like, school's important, or were they pushing the sport at all?
Was never pushy on any of it. There was always like an expectation, like if we're going to send you to school and pay for you to go to boarding school, you're going to do like it reasonably well. Like if you're fucking around, we're going to, like, it's not going to go like this. But was never the type of parents who were pushy with sport in terms of we're going to get these coaches and pay for all this sort of stuff. It was like, if you want to play footy or play basketball, give the opportunity, we'll drive you wherever we need to go. But it was never, you must do well at this one sport. Like you hear about that a lot with tennis and kid golfers and stuff where they just hate it by the time they're 12 years old. It wasn't like that for us. But there was an expectation with school to do well. And
your mum was happy to drive you though, 3.5 hours?
Yeah, they loved it. Like they love coming, like they still come to nearly every footy game they can in Melbourne. Like they'll drive up every weekend to come watch. And my little sister's now playing netball in London for the London team, and mum usually flies over there once a year to try and watch her play a few games and come back, which is probably as far as you could go in the world to go and watch your kids play sport. But yeah, they loved it as much as we did.
Okay, so I'm just thinking, when we met, that was when you just arrived in Melbourne.
It would have been through Drew McGuinness.
And you had a car, which I remember was like a big deal.
What did I probably
I don't know.
I probably had my first car was a red Mitsubishi Lancer, that had faded pink, and I got ripped off by the guy that bought it off because it looked cool when I got it. And then within a week, the paint started to like fade more and more, and I was driving around a pink Lancer as an 18-year-old kid who just got drafted, and I didn't think I was very cool. Oh. But I might have sold it by the time I met you and got something different because I was too embarrassed.
So how was that transition going to Melbourne?
So I finished school like in November or whenever it was, and then you have maybe a week off, and I was getting ready to go to schoolies. You're waiting for the draft, which is the end of November. The draft night happens, and we didn't have Foxtel at home, so I went into my mate's house in town, and you watch the draft on TV, and by the time you sort of get through the first couple of rounds of the draft, where all the best players go, we get to the third round, and they don't call out every name. It sort of comes up across the bottom of the screen, like Thomas McDonald, draft pick 53, and I saw my name flash up, and I was like, oh, does that mean I'm drafted? And we all saw it, and then just started partying in the house and erupted, and everyone was super happy. But like, I was a late draft pick, so you never really expected to, there's not much fanfare when you're a late draft pick. It's the top guys who everyone's excited about when they get to the club. These guys are going to change the club forever. And get drafted. That was on a Thursday night. The footy club, your phone just blows up instantly. The coach, the general manager, the CEO, they all call you. They said, yep, we'll come drive down to Melbourne, be here on Sunday. We'll move you in with our host family, and we'll get started at training on Monday. So you pack up the car the next day on the Friday and get ready to leave on the Saturday night. And
wait, this is while you're at school?
No, this is school had just sorry. Okay. So I was meant to be going to schoolies on the Monday.
Where were you going to go?
Lawn, I think. And of course they go, yeah, well, you're not going to schoolies, mate. You're coming to footy training. And so cancelled schoolies and then drove to Melbourne that weekend to start on the Monday. And you move in with a host family, so a family that usually they're Melbourne supporters or whatever team it is. They support the team, and quite often they're empty nesters. The kids have all left for uni or left for work, and that was the scenario with this family. They had 3 spare bedrooms. All the kids were 19 to 25, and they'd all just left the house, and the parents wanted someone to come in. So me and Lucas Cook, who I got drafted with, went and lived with this random family, which was strange.
Where did they live?
Camberwell. So the dad, Greg, the most over-the-top, like, out loud guy you would ever meet, like, come in to shake his hand and he rips me in and hugs me for 10 seconds, and I've never met the man before. And the mum's American from Cincinnati and has no concept of footy, doesn't care about it, but the most lovely woman. And yeah, so we lived with them for the first year of our career pretty much, and still for probably 10 years after that year we'd go and have dinner with them every week or every fortnight. Amazing. Until just recently they've been in China the last couple of years with a new business they've started. But a lot of people who come from interstate or from country teams, they get moved in with a host family to help them sort of get into footy rather than just moving the boys into an apartment who are 18 years old and have got no idea about anything. That's how they sort of get them started for the first year. They move them in with a host family. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
did you have any expectations about what was going to happen with the draft? Or
I was hoping I'd get drafted around where I did, like be a late draft pick or potentially a rookie pick, which is like a secondary draft, which doesn't really make much difference. But yeah, best case scenario was where I got drafted for me, because I was an okay junior player, but I was probably drafted more on potential of being quite tall. I had good athletic combine testing results, like I had good endurance running and I had a good jump, and I was reasonably quick, but I wasn't really a dominant junior player. And I was probably drafted more on potential than anything else. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which has probably changed a little bit recently. Like at that stage, like 10, 15 years ago, there was a lot of drafting athletes and we'll teach them how to be footballers. Now it's gone back to, well, we can make reasonable guys into good athletes. It's hard to teach guys how to play footy at a high level. So now it's probably more the opposite way. You draft good footballers and we'll make them fit enough, we'll make them strong enough, we'll improve their physical characteristics. So it swings both ways.
How does that work for other sports? Do you know, like US sports? Is it
like basketball? US sports, like NFL, is probably more based on the physical, because it's just those guys are just so insanely big, fast, powerful that if you don't have the physical ability, you just can't play that sport. And it's more about they teach them the very specific football movements. Basketball is probably a mixture of both, but obviously you've got to be tall as well. Soccer is probably more about the skill, I reckon. Well, you probably got a better idea. You lived over there. But soccer, you can, if you've got good ball skills, you've probably got a way to play in soccer. But yeah, the NFL is the opposite. It's just pure physical ability, being massive, huge dudes. And even if you're not super powerful, if you're massive and fat, you can probably be an offensive lineman if you're strong enough to hold your position. So yeah, real mixture.
Okay, should we get into overcoming adversity?
I suppose, yeah. Look, I'm not going to pretend I've had that much adversity though. Like we were talking before about you've had people with all kinds of depression and drug addictions and really, really, really tough stuff. I haven't had anything like that, which that's a good thing, I guess. Like, don't want anyone to go through that sort of stuff. My sort of adversity has probably been a mixture of just injuries. Like I've had both shoulders reconstructed. I've had an elbow cleaned out with 9 bone fragments in it. I've had a knee scope. I've had both ankles surgery. I've had a Liz Frank repair on my foot just recently. I've had broken ribs. I've had punctured lungs, like all kinds of which is probably pretty standard for a lot of footballers. So it's probably been, for me, it's each time you have one of them, you kind of think you can never get back to playing again or you'll never be the same. But I'd say, so for me, the first thing that I sort of overcome was probably 3 or 4 years ago. My career was really at a crossroads. I was probably close to being done. Melbourne had said to me, we want to try and trade you and we think a fresh start. And I thought the same thing. I wanted a fresh start. And we got
Why
round to
did you want a fresh start?
Because I was out of the team. I wasn't playing very well. I was pretty, not angry at the coaches, but I just wasn't happy in their environment we were in. And I probably spent like a month or two at the end of the season just, wallowing in my own self-pity a bit. And I think we probably all go through that stage when something hasn't gone well, whether it's work or family, going, it's not my fault, it's their fault. If they would do this, then I would be fine. If the coaches would put me in this position, I'd be playing well. And so I just had those sort of thoughts in my head for a good month or two. And we got towards the end of the year and I thought, well, the trade period's the way for me to get a fresh start and then I'll be good again. And we got to the trade period and I still had 2 years left on my contract. So if they couldn't trade me, I'd be coming back to Melbourne, which was a good thing because it meant I still had a chance to play footy, because if I was out of contract, you'd be out on the street pretty much.
How did you feel about being up for trade, or you were just like, yeah?
At that stage, I was still sort of like just pissed off with everything and I was like, I just want to go somewhere else. And I had a couple of interviews before the trade period with other teams and I thought, yep, this will happen, I'll get a fresh start. And then we get to the trade period and no team was interested in actually doing the trade when it happened. And so that was a bit of like self-realisation that, yeah, maybe you're not as good as you think. And so then I was like, all right, I got to get out of my own head with thinking that it's other people's fault. Like, this is on me.
How quick was that transition? Like, did you kind of wallow in it for a bit?
I think so the trade period goes for like 10 days. At the end of that 10 days, I was like, all right, now I need to do something different. Like, this is on me. And so my mindset sort of shifted that as soon as that happened, I was like, all right, I'm going to prove Melbourne wrong. Like, this is my chance to make them go, we made a mistake by trying to trade him anyway. And so I started training from that day, literally every day from then until we came back like 3 months later. I was training by myself. So normally every player would have a month off, like a month of doing pretty much nothing or like low level exercise. And then they'd have a month or two of build up before we come back as a team. They give you a program. But I was like, nah, stuff it. I'm going to just train every day.
This is like revenge buddy after a
honestly,
breakup.
It was like, that's what it was kind of like. I was like, fuck them, I'm going to show them. And it was like bodies, because I was overweight, like in footy terms, like I was probably 3 or 4 kilos too heavy. I wasn't moving very well. And so I changed my training. I went and got a personal trainer for the first time ever. I'd never gone and paid someone to help me with my training. So I got a guy who was like a footwork expert. I changed my diet completely and started doing that every day. And honestly, it was like revenge body, ex-girlfriend sort of stuff. But once I sort of started seeing results, like within 2 or 3 weeks, I was like, God, I'm moving better. I'm looking better in the mirror, and you start feeling good about yourself again. And you start doing the training with a few other guys, and boys started noticing, like, geez, what have you been doing? Like, you look different. And I feel like it started to compound on itself. Like, kind of like when you go to the gym, the first week or two, you look no different. But as soon as you start to notice a couple of differences, you're like, oh, I can start to see a little bit of a muscle there, or a bit of ab there, or whatever it may be you're aiming for. It makes it so much more more motivating to keep going again and again. And so I started to see the results. And I think the diet, like I changed my diet completely. I went on a really low carb diet, which it's not perfect for footy long term, but at that stage I was like, I just want to strip as much weight off as I can.
So it was clear, like, exactly what you had to do.
I'd done a version of it earlier in my career with the diet stuff, but it hadn't worked that well. So I'd done a fair bit of research on how to sort of change it. And I'd gone to instead of like a keto diet, I did more of a high protein version of it. And I'd add carbs in for around my training. So I'd have rice and potato before big training sessions to give me the carbs for a big running session, which I'm not sure if your listeners really care about nutrition sort of stuff.
No,
but
I'm just wondering where it came from. So it's like, okay, 10 days the training period, and then you're like, I need to change. And then over what time are you like, okay, what's the plan? What's the diet plan? Who do I...
I think like literally one night I sat down and I just like, I like to write things in my notepad diary sort of thing. And I just started writing down, all right, what am I going to do for this week of training? And I was like, Monday is going to be footwork, personal training guy in the morning. Afternoon's going to be weights with cross training on the bike. So it was like hour and a half in the morning, have lunch, do an hour of leg weights and do half an hour of cross training in the afternoon. Then it was going to be Tuesday, it was going to be upper body weights with boxing. And then I just wrote out a week and I wrote down like, I didn't write a nutrition program, but I wrote a guideline. I was like, I'm not going to have any of the shit foods we all know. Ice cream, chips, lollies, like that's all gone. No drinking. I'm going to focus on bacon, eggs, avocado on the mornings and protein shake as a snack after training. And I'm going to have some sort of protein steak, slow cooked meat in the afternoon, night. And I sort of wrote out a week of what I was roughly going to do. And then I just sort of keep adding to it each time we went along.
This is when everyone else is taking time off. And...
Yeah, everyone's in time off. But I felt like because I didn't play for the last month or two of the season, I had to start straight away. And I was like, I need to make an impression when I get back that I'm serious and I'm ready to go again.
And you never looked back or were like, oh, I can't be bothered this week?
So not until later on in that year. So I got through that sort of 2 or 3 months of the off season. We go back to training in December probably, and we do 2 weeks of training before with the team. All the team comes back together at the start of December. We have a time trial, and then we do 2 weeks of training. And I ran really well in the time trial.
What's the time trial?
Back then it was 4 1-kilometre runs with like 4 minutes in between each one.
Okay.
And
so you could clearly see like, this is how I'm going to be measured and I want to make sure I'm like dominating.
So we have that. We have the time trial. We have our body fat testing where they test like your skin folds around 7 sites. With the tongs, the calipers. And I was like, I need to be impressive on that. I need to run well. I need to train well for the footy stuff. And I thought I made it like, it's kind of like you said, seeing the ex-girlfriend for the first time with the body. And so I had like my career best in all of those areas when I came back. And that was sort of like, this is what I need to do to keep going. So I got back in it. I played round 1 in the team. I was back in the side and pretty much had like the best start of my career for the first 2/3 or 3/4 of that season. Now I'm looking back on it in hindsight, I probably went a bit too hard. Like I was so obsessive at that start. I trained so hard for so long. I got to the back end of the season and I started to have back issues. Had some stress fractures in my back. I missed a couple of games. But Melbourne was going so well, like we were top of the ladder and we were going into finals. So this was 2021. And I wanted to obviously keep playing, like we were a chance to actually win the grand final. Towards the end of that season, we all got moved over to Perth to play the finals. And I was really struggling with my body at that stage. So I was sort of looking back, I needed to do that 3 or 4 months of insane training and food and discipline. At the back end of the season, I realised I'd probably gone a bit too hard, like my body was cooked. You can't maintain that level of intensity forever, like for a season, let alone for a 15-year career. So got to the end of that season, I was having Toradol injections in my arse cheek before a game to sort of get the pain out of my back to play the last 3 games. But we won the grand final. We won over in Perth, and it was like
kicked a goal on
kicked the goal after the siren, but we're already up by 70 points, so it's not a real sort of after the siren goal. But it was sort of, I look back and I go, it was worth every second of the training that went into it, even though I sort of paid the price on the back end, because it sort of helped me realise just to get out of my own head when things went and stop blaming other people. Majority of it was on me. Like it was on my mindset, why was I blaming others? Like, if I looked in the mirror earlier, I probably could have turned it around in that season before and got myself back in the side, and I wouldn't have had to go through all that. But I now see it as a learning example of, well, there might be scenarios where other people are to blame. 90% of the time, if things aren't going well in your life, it's probably on you to have a look at what you've done. Like, what's led you to this point? Why are you not playing good footy? Why are you doing no good at work? Why are your friends not wanting to hang out with you? Like, what are you doing? And so that, for me, that was the most important part, was actually look back and realise that, yeah, have a look in your own backyard first.
Yeah, and then, that is the, like, you being like, oh, it's not that much adversity compared to whatever. That's not really the point. The point is, like, everyone who comes on here, they, like, are talking about, yeah, this victim mentality thing doesn't work, and this is how I had to change my life. And, yeah, it can be something, you know... people have really fucked up.
So what did you have with the people who've come on? You were talking about the guy with the really bad depression. How did he get out of, like, I'm not in that stage where I'm thinking about suicide, but how do those people get out of that successfully long term?
Well, I think that's what I like talking about a lot, because that's what I struggle with, those thoughts you're saying. That's like my experience of depression, what other people say, it's like that, but for life, it's like everything's too hard. Like, I'm not going to get out of bed. Like, it's just those being trapped in, it's like, sounds so similar to what you're saying. It's just like the world's fault.
Yeah.
And so it's making that choice of like, yeah, it's really fucking hard. And then that's like gratitude and everything like that. And probably like everything, like, yeah, what you said reminded me of some, like Jordan Peterson type.
I was just thinking about the same thing when you said that, like his sort of thing about just doing one thing, getting started with one little thing. And I sort of think the same way with the gym. Just getting a few days in a row at the gym and you start to see a tiny bit of progress, it's very easy to snowball it going that way. Just like it's easy to snowball going the other way when you start going, oh, it's coach's fault, it's their fault that I'm not playing. It's very easy to just keep adding the blame on. But when it starts going the other way, it's easy to get the ball on a roll. And for me, to start getting footy stuff all back in line, once you started on the first thing, which was just training straight away, everything else started to get going in that way. And I don't know if it's something like depression, if just simple things like adding a 15-minute walk every night, or, 15 minutes of breath work or something, does that just help people get started on something positive? Or I'm going to cook a healthy meal tonight, or I don't know, like, does little things help people start to get on a better path bit by bit?
I think so. I think it's about that choice. It's like that moment you had of like, I need to change. So then that's the same thing with depression. It's like, I want to get better, so I'm going to make this change. And that's literally now, because I just had this bad week recently, and it's so annoying because it's like you think, and maybe it's similar with footy when it's like you're going really well and then you get an injury or something like is derailed, and it's like, fuck, why is this happening again? Like,
yeah.
But it's just like, okay, this is what we're dealing with. And then, yeah, it is the basic stuff. And this is why the guy, Lance, yesterday, the former AFL player I was telling you about, he said something that really helped me. That's like that's your medicine. So it's like every morning doing that walk, doing like these small things. And it's like, this is what I will do. And the same with, like going to the gym or whatever. But I guess it's like, it's just being sustainable, that you can stick to it. Yeah. And obviously, I mean, you're clearly like really disciplined, do you think? Or were there times when you were like, fuck this diet?
Yeah, and I still have that now. I would say, look, probably compared to the average sports person or the average like person who plays local footy, I'm disciplined compared to maybe that because of the training and the work ethic involved just to even be at the level. But there's guys I've played with who are just insane. Like, I'm thinking of, there's a guy who played for the Bulldogs, Daniel Cross, who came and played for a couple of years at Melbourne, and then he was our head of rehabilitation for injuries for a while. Now he's at North Melbourne. But even when he had retired, he could never, ever allow himself to go, I'm going to have ice cream after dinner tonight. He was so disciplined. I've never seen anyone like it. We travelled to Maroochydore every year for a training camp in February to train in the heat. And I lived in his house one year. Like, we were in little townhouses together. And we would sit and watch like the tennis, because it's the tennis season at the start of Feb or end of Jan, whenever it was. And we'd just be sitting on the couch watching at 7:30 at night. But every ad break, he would get up and he'd do a different body part stretch, and then he'd do a few crunches and maybe some push-ups, and he'd do some back mobility every ad break until it was time to go to bed. And we were kind of like, why are you doing that? And he's like, oh, I've just always done it. Like, it helps me with my mobility for the next day. And I was like, that level of discipline to do the tiniest little thing every night for your whole life was just insane. Like, I've never seen anyone so, like, he'd weigh out every meal. He'd never, ever eat anything that would ever make him feel worse the next day. He would push himself at every training session. And even once he retired, he was the rehab coach. He'd come in and he'd run at 6 a.m. by himself to do his own running. Then he'd take the training session with the rehabbers and run with them. And they would have like a 12 Ks of running session to come back from injury. And then he'd go and play local footy and train with them like he was playing AFL. Like, just the amount of work he would put in was insane. And I was like, compared to him, I've got no discipline. So it's sort of a spectrum of...
But I reckon the ad break thing, that could just be a habit, which could be a good thing.
Yeah.
Like, I do this weird thing where I'm like, I always, if there's stairs next to an escalator, have to take the stairs. And then I'm like, I look like such a fucking weirdo, because then the person I'm talking to, I'm like, sorry, I have to take the stairs. But it's just like, okay.
That's habit, yeah.
That's habit. But the food, that could be like unhealthy.
It's everything combined with a guy like that. And he was never really that... You wouldn't say he was the most talented footballer ever, but he played for 16, 17 years, was one of the best Bulldogs players ever. And it was all just because of all this stuff that he put in. And it's become so ingrained and so habitual, he can never stop it now, I don't think. Like, he'll be doing this until his knees give out.
Well, that's what I think, though. That's another important thing, that when you're starting something, so because people can be like, okay, I've got to change, but then it becomes obsessive. So it's like, oh my God, I missed my meditation, I'm a failure. And then you go like totally off the rails. And that could be with food. It's like...
Oh, 100% with food. It's the same. Like, we can have a footy game, and quite often after a game you go and eat whatever you want. Like, you get pizza, burgers, whatever, because it's just, you've done so much exercise that what you eat probably doesn't make much difference to body fat after a game. But then what happens is you get up on the Sunday and you're like, oh, I'm hungry, I'm sore, I can't be bothered doing anything. Uber Eats, and then you start eating crap the next day, and then it rolls into day after day. So, yeah, it's just, I keep sort of coming back to the decisions start to snowball. Whereas if you've missed a meditation or if you've missed a workout for whatever reason, how do you just forget about that and go back to the next day or the next session and get back on track? But it is hard to do. For some reason, your brain likes to just keep doing the same thing after it's made a decision.
Yeah, but I think as long as it's not the beating yourself, like punishing yourself of like, I'm just a failure and now I'm going to eat a burger every night even though I don't. It's like the self-sabotaging thing.
Yeah.
If it's just like, damn, I'm in the habit of not going to gym, I'm going to change the habit, then... Because, it's fine to fall off. It's healthy. Like, I think that's too extreme if you're like, I can't
function without this.
Then it's like you can't eat cake at your kid's birthday or something. That's like so depressing.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is, though, on the perfect way. Like, what's the perfect balance? Like, some people say you should never have cheat meals and, you should never blow out on drinking or whatever. Like, I don't know. Is it healthy to go and have a night drinking and be hammered drunk, or is that good for your mental health or bad for your body? Like, obviously it's probably bad for your body, but is that a good thing for your mental health to go, sometimes I'm just going to go out, I'm going to get drunk and I'm dancing on a nightclub floor because this is fun? Or is that actually making things worse for us? Like, I don't know. I'd like to know.
I reckon it's like intuition. You've got to just go with what your body tells you. Like, when you get really into that, so when you're out of your head and you're more just like trusting your body and trusting yourself, and like, I can go on a night out and get drunk, who cares? But that's why it's like being kind to yourself, all that stuff, because if you do go on a night out and then you're doubting it and then you're beating yourself up, it's like, well, that's a waste of time. It's like, who cares? You went on it. Or if you come back and you're like, oh, I hate being hungover, like I hate how this feels, then it's like, cool, note to self. Like,
well, I'm a bit like that now. And especially with kids, like I've got 2 little kids. It's got to be a very special scenario for me to want to be out late, night out, because the kids are up at 6:30, and I'll wake up in the morning if I've had more than maybe 4 or 5 drinks, and I go, oh, this is just, it's not worth it. No matter what the fun was the night before, it's not worth it to not be able to play with the kids or feel horrific doing it in the morning for 4 hours before you can finally get going. So, yeah, a bit different from maybe a 21-year-old.
But that's why I think that's why some of those mental models, if they're healthy, like the stretching in the ad breaks or whatever, and then you continue with your life, like people have rules that it's like nothing good happens after midnight. So it's like midnight. It's like then nothing, you're not going to miss anything. Especially I think if you've had those nights when you're young, it's like, yeah, cool, you've like been up until sunrise or whatever, and it's like, do I need to keep doing that for the rest of my life?
Probably
like,
not.
Yeah.
No.
So it's like, I know what happens afterwards. Like, it's funny stuff will happen, but like everyone's just drunk. Like, it's not.
Yeah. All right, back to what are your sort of things you have each week to week then that you get done? You said, oh, I had a bad week with this. Like, what didn't you do or what went wrong?
No, a bad week in terms of I was so depressed.
But what caused that? What changed?
I don't know. That's why it's annoying.
Yeah.
Because it will just happen that I just feel, I guess, worthless is the feeling. It's just like, what's the...
And if you look back, you can't think of, like, was food different? Was it sleeping? Is any of that related for you?
I think hormonal, there might be like a big hormone, which, so to get more serious about this, it would be like tracking it properly and being like, but it's just hard to do, like, because when you get into that mood, you're like, there's no point in anything.
Yeah.
So it's hard. Yeah. But I don't know. There's also like, because my stuff will get quite existential about like, what am I? And maybe this is what happens to athletes after finishing, which sounds like you're like good thinking in advance. But if you get to a point where it's like, who am I? Like, what am I doing with my life? When you think like that too much, it's just negative. Like, you just shouldn't be thinking like that all the time, because then they're kind of, if you strip everything away, like, there isn't really a point. Or is there a point? Who knows?
I never get to that sort of level, but I do swing back and forth. So I swing back and forth from thinking about working after footy and life after footy between, on the positive end, going, I've got so much to offer to so many different people or businesses on what I've learned from footy, and I've got all these different viewpoints and lifestyle experiences that I can share and hopefully help someone, to swinging the other way and going, nah, I'm just a footballer who knows how to kick a footy around and run a time trial, and I have no experience, and everyone else has been in the workforce since 21 after uni, and I'm going to be 32, 33, and I'm just a footballer. And so I swing back and forth, and I never, like, that's the sort of, now I never get depressed about it, but I sometimes go, well, oh shit, maybe I'm nowhere near where I think I am sometimes in my own head about what I could actually do post-footy. And and I have no experience, like, I've done a couple little bits of work experience here and there since doing my degree, but until I'm actually in a job or in a business of some sort, I have no idea what I actually can contribute or how it works. Like, I'm just so used to a footy routine for 13 years of what it looks like at the same club, same different coaches and things through the years, but there's a few players I've played the whole 13 years with, and we're just so used to seeing each other every morning and going through I get in there, I get my ankles taped, I get physio treatment on whatever injury, I go and do back mobility, I do glute activations, and then we go and do a team meeting into training. Like, it's a very regimented schedule, all before 8 a.m, before we go into training, which I know what that looks like, and I know what weights looks like, and it's just such a shock to think about what life would be like sitting in a boardroom or something after footy, that sometimes I get really nervous about it, which is weird.
No, I think that's fair enough.
I think it's fair enough, but then I don't know why I swing between such wild, I'm going to be the best ever at this after footy, versus I know nothing. Like,
yeah, okay, so this is really helpful. Charlie Kovas on this podcast a couple of days ago, he was saying something like, if you you need to realise, like, the person who knows the most in the world, like, that you know, like, who you think is, like, the smartest, most accomplished person out of everything there is to know in the world, like, they know, like, this tiny, tiny percent, right? Because the world is so big.
Yeah.
Like, if you think of whoever, like Bill Gates or something, he'd probably never even heard of AFL.
Yeah.
For example, like, you know about this whole world that he has no idea about. And so confidence is about, like, yeah, that first thing that you're saying, reminding yourself that you do have all this value to add because you do know about this stuff and all your other personal attributes. But then I think it's good having that doubt, because then you're not like some arrogant, because then you're not going to get very far in life if you think you know everything and then people just don't want to be around you. But so it's good to have reality check. But yeah, it's like staying grounded, which is probably the solution for my thing. It's like daily that's what this guy Charlie said. It's like reminding yourself, like, of your identity, and if you can figure out your purpose as well, that helps. But it can be like a general thing and it can change, but so then every day you're like, as in, like, if you're finished up and you're feeling lost, or for anyone who's feeling like this, it's like, who am I? Okay, this is who I am. And there's stuff that's true to you no matter what, like, regardless of footy, regardless of achieving anything.
Yeah.
And then you just reinforce that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really what I need to do. And I think for a lot of people who get so hard on themselves, it's like reminding yourself, like, what have I done? Like, what can I add? So that's awesome that you do. Do you just naturally do that? Like,
well, I think about it when I did a couple of weeks of work experience at Mondelez, which the business that owns Cadbury, just before Christmas, and that sort of just reminded me of how little experience or what I know outside of footy. But then when I went and did a couple of weeks, I was kind of like, I could figure this out. Like, this is not brain surgery. Like, I can figure out how to fit in here, and I've had a lot of experience with the footy club with talking in groups and teamwork and public speaking, and I was like, there's definitely things here that I've got an advantage on what other people have worked here. Like, there's people in this group that don't want us to talk in front of a group. They don't want to present, and I'm like, I'm so lucky that through footy I would have done hundreds of media interviews, podcasts, post-game radio interviews. I've stood up in front of the group to give presentations, and I'm like, I'm so lucky I've gotten that experience, even though I might not have the in-work business experience that these other people in the group had while I was at Mondelez. Yeah,
but any job, I think it's like you learn. Okay, so you've done something where you had to have the skills and the natural ability. Like, how much of footy is like a big part of it would be like genetic?
Oh yeah, look, I'm 6'5" and 100 kilos. Like, there's a genetic component to that, and like a good athlete. But then a lot of the skill acquisition comes through training. Yes.
Okay. So that, and then also probably like your way of like discipline is also like a genetic thing. Like, some people
I don't
just
know.
like.
I find that one interesting. I reckon there's a lot more how you're brought up on that rather than genetics.
Huh.
Like the lifestyle you've lived from, whenever you could talk and go to any sport training.
Like, your parents instilled it in you somehow?
I think so. And even just the teams you're involved in. Like, did you have a good junior footy coach, or did you have a good primary school teacher that helped with that sort of stuff? I reckon makes a big difference.
Interesting. Yeah, that probably makes sense.
Like, I've seen so many guys at AFL level turn their career around from looking like they're probably going to be out of the league in their third or fourth year to all of a sudden being all Australian players down the line. Like Max Gawn, do you know Max, our captain? He had done 2 knee reconstructions. He'd been in trouble for smoking on the way to training. He'd had multiple drinking problems. Well, not problems, but he'd been caught drinking when he probably shouldn't have been, and was looking like his career was on the edge, to now being probably the greatest ruckman in the history of the game, because he found a way to sort of turn it around halfway through his AFL career. It wasn't like it wasn't genetics that changed him at 24 years old. Like, that was the way he was coached, trained, mentored as he got to that stage, got him to turn it around. So that's why I don't think there's as much genetics in that sort of stuff.
But do you think the genetics is in, like, him being the type of person who, like, I have no idea. Like, do you think there are some people are wired to like keep pushing?
Oh, absolutely, yes. But I think in footy groups, there's so much more influence because there's 45 guys of the same age and another 10 or 15 coaches. There's so many influences that hit that group, like the decision of a few key players to what we're going to do. Like, does a team function where there's drinking become out of hand because a few key people start to make bad decisions versus a few key people make really good decisions? Influences so many other players, and so the group dynamics in a footy club makes such a difference. Like, most footy teams have a similar amount of talent, similar amount of like physical capabilities, but some teams are like Melbourne. For the first 8 years, we were like the worst team in history pretty much of my career. It wasn't because we were that low on talent.
St Kilda's been worse.
We were probably worse though in that period of, like, we were always bottom 4 for my first 8 seasons. And I look back and it wasn't like we lacked that much talent. We had a heap of high draft picks, but until the sort of group dynamics and the cultural side of it started to come through and impact a bigger range of players, we were always down the bottom. But then once it turned, it started to build momentum and you started to get a really good group come through, and now we've had 2 really successful years of winning it and then second on the ladder in the year after that.
So what caused it to turn?
I think just a few of the key people, like guys like Gorney, Christian Petrarca, Angus Brayshaw, like some senior players starting to change the way we trained, the way we talked to each other, the way we did things, little habits around the club. Like, there was just one little example we had a meeting talking about having more respect for the staff at the footy club by, if you've got a massage at 3:30 till 4, like, you're there at 3:29. Like, we don't make them stay overtime for 5 minutes because you weren't there on time. And when we play an away game, everyone picks up all the shit on the floor. Like, everyone cleans up so that we don't have the opposition teams having to clean up the change rooms when we leave. And so just some little decisions start to make you a bit more proud to be part of the club. And
was that ego stuff that was, or just sloppiness?
I think it was just sloppiness and just a bit of a lack of respect for all the work that other people do for you to play football. Because when you're playing football, you think you're just the only people that matter are the guys that run out and play. But there's so many others that make it all happen. Like the property guy, he's there at 7 a.m. every morning and he's still putting everything away at 6 p.m. and just having respect, and he's getting paid a quarter of what most of the players are. But can you just help him out by putting the bags back in the property truck and say thanks when he gets something for you? Like, just having a bit, like, I think we started to respect what went into the game more so than just what we were involved in playing.
Mm-hmm.
Which then just sort of changed the culture of, like, being a little bit less selfish on the field and being, helping someone else out a bit more. I think that sort of helped turn it for us a lot.
And then were you able to, like, feed off that?
Well, once we started talking about that, we started talking about it on field, and how can your role help someone else do really well on the team? And we kind of talked about, like, we've got heaps of good players in this team. You're not getting a heap of recognition externally when you're bottom 4 on the ladder. But when we won the grand final, guys had probably worse stats than what they did in those other years. But all of a sudden, everyone in public thinks you're the best thing ever. Like, you have people stopping you down the street saying, well done on the grand final. And even though I played pretty shit in the grand final, like, I had 8 touches, I kicked 2 junk time goals, but people coming up saying thank you so much for what you did. Whereas the year before, I probably played better, but you get no recognition. Like, no one cares if you're a bottom 4 side. So guys it started to turn where guys realised, if I'm more selfless in this team and we do better, it's better for all of us. Like, but it's hard to tell people you have to take a step back for us to take a step forward as a team. But once you sort of get proof that it works, it's easier to get it happening again.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then for your kind of what do you call it? When you got yourself in good shape and everything.
Yeah.
I was going to say transformation.
Yeah.
Could you like feed off like, okay, these guys have like turned this stuff around and I can do that as well?
I think you get so competitive. So maybe when guys saw I came back really fit and really dedicated, guys start getting competitive with the running, with the training, and they go, I'm going to beat you next session. And if guys all come back in really good condition, you get really competitive with the time trials. And it just pushes everyone else to be a little bit better because they want to catch up and everyone wants to be at the same level.
Yeah.
So that's why we always talk about when we come back, you've got to be in good condition for your time trial and for the training so that we can get straight into training and we can actually do competitive match play, for example. So that's what we're pushing every year. Don't make bad decisions in the off season that will hold us back as a team when we come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the, sorry, what I was going to say on the job thing is like, okay, so compared to AFL, this is like reassuring you, compared to AFL where it's like, yeah, genetic component, years of skill acquisition, all this other stuff. Jobs are just not like that.
No.
Most of them, it's like you learn on the job. Like
Yeah.
you have to get in the door, but it's like getting in the door, a lot of it is like being like a nice person who asks questions, who's interested, who's like, I want to add value, which
And
you
who
have
you
all
know.
those things.
And who you know.
Yeah, but that's how it works. Like,
Yeah.
why are you on this podcast? Because I know you. Like, and that's fine. Like, people, I mean, I don't know. But people want to help. It's like if you have a problem, who are you going to call? Like, someone who you trust, right? Like, if you need, you know, something.
Anytime if you're doing a house, if you need something fixed around your house, you don't call I don't call a random tradie. I find someone who's used a person before because we trust that they're not going to rip us off and they'll do a good job. Like Yeah,
exactly. So that is just how things work. And then it's just, okay, in society, like, how do we make sure people who are, like, left behind or still get included? So it's not like... But also, you don't want incompetent. You don't want it's like who you know, someone's son and they're, like, totally incompetent.
There's nothing worse than nepotism in any sort of workplace.
Yeah, but that's like with the tradie thing, like you're calling someone who you know, but you're not calling your brother who's a tradie, but he actually sucks. It's like you want the job done.
Yes.
So if someone's there because they're someone's relation or whatever, but they're actually really good, you know, it's like anyway. So, but yeah, that's fine. Like you're good at talking to people and networking. So it is like a lot of it is just talking to people and then you get in the door and then they teach you everything. Because there's so much like jargon and bullshit, but it's actually, and that can be intimidating.
Yeah.
And you might think like, oh my God, I don't know this because I haven't worked. And like self-doubt feeds, but it's like, no, what the hell, like what does that mean? And then people are like, oh, it's just this new word that came in like last week or something.
Which is the same thing with footy. We have the same vocabulary that no one would, if you weren't brought up in an AFL club, you wouldn't know what half the words we use are. So, and I learned that when I went to a couple of weeks at Mondelez. I was sort of keeping up with what was going on, but with all the jargon and it was just so hard to comprehend what they were talking about. And I'd keep asking, they said, just ask questions if you don't know. And they go, and I said, well, why do you even use this jargon if it's not relevant? They go, I don't know, it's just been that way for decades. So yeah, you're right. If you pick that stuff up, then you're probably fine. But it's pretty intimidating when you first start there and turn up for the first day.
Yeah, it is intimidating.
But I'll find out soon enough. Hopefully another couple of years of footy and then see what happens after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How, sorry, going back to you saying people stopping you on the street, but that only being a thing because like the grand final, and then how do you just stay pretty grounded through that and just, like, okay, cool, people are excited because it's a premiership, but I actually played better last year and no one cared, so...
No, I think of it as like only a positive thing. Like it's awesome when people come up and say hi, as long as they're respectful. Like occasionally you get a dickhead at a pub who's hammered and wants to talk shit, but 95% of the time, 99% of the time, it's just like people being so happy to have seen a grand final and because it's just like you bring so much joy to people watching the team when they do well. Like we sort of have a bit of a mission statement as a team that the reason we play as a team, everyone has their own individual reasons, but the team sort of philosophy is that we bring joy and happiness to those around us. And so we play for when we win a game and we're in the change rooms and family and kids are in there and we enjoy that time with them and all the fans outside who've had a great experience coming to the game, because we think about these people putting thousands of dollars to come and watch whether we win or lose. But the reason we play is not to necessarily win, but it's because we bring joy and happiness to those who come. And so when people come up and want to say hi, especially like kids or want to have a photo, which doesn't happen that often for me, but for some players like Gorney, everywhere he goes it happens, and he's probably one of the best ever at just always saying yes and always being positive with them. like that's not going to happen when I'm finished footy. So it's not like I'm kind of thinking of myself as just make the most of this while this is happening, because no one else gets to have this experience of people being so happy for you for what you get to do as a job.
Did you, because I can imagine other people might get addicted to it or not. Like, do you see that going on, or did you ever have a moment where it's like, damn, I want little kids to ask me for a photo, why isn't it happening? And
no, I think the one negative of it all is the bad stuff that happens on social media, the terrible messages, a lot of Indigenous players get racist stuff after games, like get horrible messages. We get messages based, like guys will just tee off on you saying, you cost me my multi, you effing dog. Like a lot of people on betting now, it's really bad. Lots of text messages. Like,
you get that?
You get it on Instagram, like direct messages saying like, you owe me 10 grand, I lost because you didn't kick 3 goals, I had you down for 3 goals today, and stuff like that, which is just bizarre. But that's happened relatively recently, last year or two. Lots of messages on, you know, you've cost me I'm going to have to sell my house, which I think usually they're jokes, but...
So how do you deal with that? Do you think they are jokes? Like, a
lot of them would be real that they've lost money, but...
and they're actually angry, or is it banned to like,
I think it's like angry, but they're probably hammered after a game or whatever. But like, it's the more sinister one is there's lots of racist stuff for the Indigenous boys, which they would happen after most games. They get comments after their photos and stuff
just
like that.
Just random abuse.
Yeah.
To do with them playing badly.
No, not even that. Like, just random racist stuff. Like, even some people just put like monkey emojis underneath Indigenous players and stuff. Like, just shit like that. That's just so unnecessary. And they're usually like anonymous accounts with no face on it or something. But yeah, it happens a lot. That's the one thing that players like have to do better on, is dealing with social media and dealing with the negative stuff on social media and being careful with that sort of thing.
How have you dealt with like putting some, like you have Twitter and like putting opinions out there, or it's just not a thing? Okay, because even with like being like, like I feel like this is what we were talking about before, like it seems like everything's so divisive, but it's like also there are sides and it's like, oh my god, you like Jordan Peterson, that means this, but is that kind of bullshit?
I cop a bit of shit on that sort of stuff, but I don't worry about it too much. Like, I don't think I'm that divisive of a person. Like, I'm allowed to like the things that I like, and I love Jordan Peterson. I love listening to his podcasts and stuff. That doesn't make, like, even if you're on the total opposite side, I don't think that makes me a bad person. Just like if someone else likes the opposite of Jordan Peterson, I don't know who that is. That doesn't make them a bad person. They just like that. Like, so I'm probably more on the end of the footballers that I'm willing to sort of show what I like and say what I think when I'm in a media interview, which I get criticised a bit for on Twitter. I don't put much stuff on Twitter, but...
Who criticises?
Just randoms, yeah.
And how do you react to it?
I just don't, generally. Like, I had one tweet about the Victorian election, sort of like, in that I didn't think it was a great result. Didn't say anything abusive or anything. And I had like 2,000 replies and 70% of them being like, you're an idiot.
And do you reply to anyone?
No, I didn't reply to any of them, but I'm not someone who's going to go and delete a tweet because people don't like it. But most footballers won't ever put out anything that's potentially divisive because they just don't want to deal with the backlash that comes.
Huh.
And like, I was one of the only ones who said I wasn't for the vaccine mandates for the AFL when it came in. And at that time, got a huge amount of pushback. You're selfish, you're going to kill grandma, all that sort of stuff.
From
media, from commentators, from random fans on Twitter.
How did that come about? Were you asked?
I was asked after training, and I was like, a reporter come and asked me because I think he knew that I'd give an answer. And I was like, no, fuck, I'm going to say it because I feel pretty strongly about this. And just dealt with it. In hindsight, I think I was right. I didn't say that you shouldn't get vaccinated. I just said everyone should be allowed to make the decision themselves. It's an individual decision. And everyone was like, no, you don't understand. You don't understand how this works. Like, this will save everyone. 2 years later, I think I was right that we all got COVID anyway. But at the time, I just copped it. So
yeah, it's interesting because in the UK, that just wasn't a thing. There was no.
It was only here in America, really, where it was super strong. Even America wasn't too bad, but here was like you just couldn't play.
Yeah. Yeah, but the UK in anything in like it was like there was no because here that was a shock for me, like having to show it
everywhere.
To like go to a cafe.
Which in hindsight, like, it's just embarrassing in my opinion, but that we got to that stage when, different scenario if you could go, you're never going to catch COVID if you're vaccinated, but we knew at that stage that wasn't the case anyway. Anyway.
So so that's really good. So do you think there are people who want to talk about stuff but they're too scared, or people are just kind of like, I can't be bothered saying?
A lot of them just can't be bothered. They're not interested in anything divisive, politically, vaccine stuff, not really that interested. And then there's probably 5 or 10% of the team who maybe would be interested but then can't be bothered dealing with all the blowback that could potentially come, especially from like Twitter, where it's the worst of the worst. Like, there's not generally a lot of positive discussion on Twitter. But yeah, I'd say a lot just don't really care. Like, I probably would, like, for the first 10 years of my career, I wouldn't have known what the difference between Liberal and Labor in Victoria was.
So what made you get interested in it?
I don't even know. I'm not sure, to be honest. Maybe it was Jordan Peterson. Listened to some of his stuff. I don't know. I can't remember.
And how did you find his stuff?
YouTube, probably. Probably YouTube algorithm that we were talking about. Like, he probably popped up randomly.
Yeah.
I thought, this is interesting. This is different.
Yeah.
No, you know what it was? It was, it was his interview with Kathy Newman, the like famous Channel 4 News one where goes. Have you seen it?
Where he's like, men are like most homeless people are men, most incarcerated people are men.
Yeah,
most
he was sort of
men.
trying to just untangle a lot of the messy stuff in statistics and show, well, this isn't the way you're presenting it is. And I was like, that was just so brilliantly done that you're interesting. I'm going to keep watching you. So, that's how I probably got interested.
And I guess, is it just in your nature to be calm and be like, that's fine if people want to insult me, I'm not going to...
Well, I think back to, well, insulting or stuff on Twitter isn't real life, because I've never had one person come up to me and say anything like I get on Twitter. I only ever get people come up with positive things saying, thank you for saying what you said the other day in that interview, but no one has ever once in my life come up and said what you said on Twitter was bullshit or what you said in that interview was wrong. It's only ever on social media, but the positive stuff comes through in real life. So I'm kind of like, I don't even know how much of it is real on Twitter.
Yeah, fair.
So that's why I don't use it very. I scroll Instagram every day. I don't post a heap except for probably some footy stuff, my family, kids, the car that I'm restoring, stuff like that. I don't. Twitter's more just for fun. Instagram. Twitter, I don't tweet very much, but I like to check every day or two for some interesting stuff.
And the meat.
Yeah. Yes, I haven't done as much meat content recently, but I got interested in like cooking meat when I started doing the low carb diet at the start of that footy season.
Okay, so you're not doing like a full meat
thing. I did at that stage when I started that sort of process. Now I'm just a bit more normal, but still do lots of, steak and American barbecue and that sort of stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm really interested. I built my own sort of barbecue setup out in the backyard. So I've got 3 different barbecues there ready to use each night. And so I'm out there most nights.
Nice. Okay, shall I ask you the last 3 questions?
Yep.
Or anything else you want to...
No, go for it.
Okay, the first one is...
I'm just going to make sure, sorry, my wife's called me twice. Oh no, it's okay, only once. I thought I was like, if I missed something, that'd be fine. Keep going.
Okay, first question, what do you do every day to stay grounded?
Ooh.
Or it doesn't have to be every day.
Look, 90% of days, depending on where we are with footy and stuff, it's kids to bed. So I always do bath time with the kids, get in their jammies, put them into bed, get their bottles with Ruby. But every time I can possibly be home, like I'll try and do that. Footy wise, before every training session, I'll have like a specific sort of routine of getting prepped to go out and train or play. So at my age and how many years I've played, the body doesn't feel very good in the morning. So I have to go through like a mobility routine, activation, all this sort of stuff that I do before every training and game. If I just tried to walk out and train, I'd feel horrible. So footy-wise, I have a very, this back mobility stuff and glute activation, which get me ready to play. And then, night time, it's usually the kids.
Is there a book that's had a big influence on your life?
I really liked, now I don't like him anymore, the guy who wrote it, but the book Homo Sapiens.
Why don't you like the guy? What?
Because he's now World Economic Forum dude who's saying Yuval...
Yuval Noah Harari.
Yeah, I love the book.
Sapiens.
Yeah, Sapiens. Sapiens, not Homo Sapiens, yeah.
Homo Deus is the other one.
Yes, I read both of them. But Sapiens is one of the best books I've ever read.
Wait, so what's the... Because people say... Because, I love Sapiens. But then people are like, oh, it's all bullshit and it's fake anthropology.
Oh, I don't know.
But then I haven't heard
I just found it super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, same.
There's another book, though, that I found really good, which has sort of got me interested in, post-footy being involved in, marketing, but more in the behavioural tendencies, is the Daniel Kahneman book.
Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yes, yeah. And who's the other guy? Kahneman and one other guy. But I got into that by reading the guy's book who wrote Moneyball. He wrote a segment about it in that book, and that's why I went and read Thinking Fast and Slow. But I loved that, and I loved thinking about... I liked the idea... The stuff I did with Cadbury and Mondelez was so interesting about how they make the ads they make and how they measure how much impact it has on consumers, and that I find really interesting.
Nice.
Why we buy what we buy, why we do what we do when we go to a supermarket, the eye tracking data, where we look, why stuff is positioned at certain levels and where in a supermarket, and I find that really interesting.
Okay, and last question, what 3 words describe the best version of you?
Competitive. Thoughtful. I don't know. I can't think of another one. I'm kind of thinking I'm splitting my life up into different phases, and...
Or the person you might, in 5 years from now, you showing up on your best day.
I'd still probably have both of them. And maybe something articulate or intelligent. But I think I need to have that competitive side of me for whatever I do, and I need to have the thoughtful side that I think about what other people would think or how others would think of me. I'm not sure on a third one. I need a bit more time.
All right.
What would you choose for yours?
I think mine, when I've said it, it's been brave, honest and kind, but maybe I would, as in those are the things I aspire to be, but then honest, I can't really change that. I'm just that's who I am. And so it's make sure to always be kind to myself and others. And then brave, I think it's I'm trying to take your thing that you're this, I like Jordan Peterson, I don't have to apologise for that, because I'm very oh my god, I'm scared of offending someone based on what I'm interested in, which is just kind of stupid.
Do you have this, you were saying at the start though, you're worried about what your friends would think about having this guy on. Did any of them ever actually make any comment or not?
No, and then recently I asked if Tony Abbott would come on, and he said yes, and I was well, this will be... But I'm do you know what? This is what I want to do. I just am interested in talking to people about who they are, and everyone's just a human, so... Well,
think about it, Tony Abbott's it's a former Prime Minister. You're not having Adolf Hitler on or Joseph Stalin. There's a difference between having, I don't know, who's the head of any, neo-Nazis now. Yeah, that's maybe... That's a fair call to say, probably don't have them on. That's way too far. But we're not talking about those sort of people. We're not talking about...
And yeah, monsters. And that's what I realised. I don't want to talk to anyone who's spreading hate. So, I don't want to talk to it's fine if people in the past have like done things they regret. Of course, yeah. So if like a murderer who's then done 20 years and is like has so much, you know, something interesting to say, and it's like really, you know, that potentially could be an interesting guess. But yeah, if someone's spreading hate, no matter who they are, they're not really welcome here.
And people probably aren't going to want to listen to it anyway. So, but yeah, I think you probably have a similar experience to me, is that most people, if they don't want to listen to it or they don't like something, they kind of go on with their day and get on with it. Like, they're not that worried about who you have on your podcast to have a chat to. Yeah. So don't stress.
And if they are, then it's kind of like, I was thinking the opposite of Jordan Peterson. That's something I say. It's like Michelle Obama. I read her book, and Jordan Peterson. I read them in the same month, and I'm like, yeah, I like both these books. Like, why am I allowed to do that?
It's okay.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
No, thank you. It was fun.